it to their friends. So it was weird, and it took all that hand selling, to people in bars and restaurants and going to all the different chain stores, Piggly Wiggly, Publix, Wegmans, Schnucks. I mean, all the stores. I would hang out in those places with my table and samples and give samples. It was a
pound of them pavement and literally just doing like
Yep.
set up in like kiosks, like samples and things of that nature.
That's it. And that's how I did it. And then that was 95 to 96. And then in 97, that's when I created the orange garnish, because before that, a lot of bars they didn't stock lemons and limes. They had lemons and limes and olives, but didn't stock oranges. And they would serve Blue Moon with a slice of lime. And I said, no, it's brewed with orange peel. You can't serve it with lime. You got to serve it with an orange. And they said, we don't have oranges. So I would go from bar to bar, giving out boxes and bags of oranges, and I'd show them how to cut it, put it on glass. And so they would do it. And people in the bar, they'd look at that drink with an orange. I think I have a cutout. Yeah, up there.
I can see it. Yeah. I remember it, the crescent moon, and it like hangs on the lip. I mean, it is an iconic, and it's almost like a beacon, like the Cracker Barrel sign on the interstate or the Golden Arches. When you see that orange and the head of the beer and that tall glass, it is very inviting. And you're like, ooh, shit, I want one of whatever they're having. When you look down and you're just looking at your regular old domestic beer.
Yeah, and then I did that in 97.
This is so fucking wild.
And then in 1998,
I kind of revolutionized beer. I would have planned a lot more accordingly for what my favorite beers were growing up. This is wild.
Well, and it's funny because in 1998, that's when I created that glass, that big, tall 23-ounce glass. And so after 1998, that's when Blue Moon started looking like it looks today. And but I did that. And the sales still were kind of slow, but by 2001, that's when things just took off, and we couldn't make enough. And then I retired in 2018. So it was January of 2018, January 5th.
And so you were technically a team member of Coors, still doing all that?
Yep. Yeah. And I retired because Coors happened to have this program where it's like, you could, when you reach their retirement criteria, you could walk out the front door with a pension, with your 401k plan, with health insurance, with all these things just for free. And so I said, this is kind of cool. So my wife and I retired, and then we said, let's get into cannabis, because cannabis is legal in Colorado. Let's check it out and see what we could do. Because when we got in, the first thing we did was we said, let's bring cannabis in the form of beer. And so because we said, let's, if they can drink their cannabis, they can take it almost anywhere. Where smoking isn't allowed in some places. And plus there's some people who with asthma, if you smoke around them, they'll say, oh, don't smoke around me because I have asthma, or, different things.
Or people that want to catch the buzz that also have the asthma. And, it's a great idea. And I want to cycle back just quickly here, or briefly. You mentioned like earlier, you said it was slow coming on with the Blue Moon. And then you made these adaptations, like you created the fucking glass. You told bars across the country to serve it with an orange.
Yeah.
You've done those things, and it was still kind of a slow crawl for those first 5 years. And you were joining a very saturated, just beer market, a lot of beer drinkers. Are you seeing similar parallels is that one of the things you saw in the cannabis scene? You're like, well, everybody's smoking weed or eating a gummy. Why don't we try to, you're not reinventing the wheel, but you're bringing a different, type of tire instead of the wheel,
You're absolutely right. Yeah, that's it. There's a lot of parallels, because back then, Blue Moon brought this whole kind of a gateway type of beer into so that Bud drinkers, Coors drinkers could taste it, and it wasn't like a 90 IBU Imperial IPA that that people
that knocks you on your ass and makes you full as a tick.
Yeah, and so people could drink a Blue Moon and say, "Wow, I can switch to that easy." So It's very similar today in the cannabis world, where people, a lot of people have had 100 milligram cookie or 100 milligram product, and it knocks them down, and they say, wow, that's too much for me. But with Ceria, we have a low dose beer. We have one that's 5 milligrams and one that's 10 milligrams, and they're designed to have a reaction similar to those beers with alcohol. So a 5% Blue Moon, you drink one of those, most people aren't going to be drunk from one Blue Moon, but they'll feel relaxed. A real similar way, our Ceria beer with 5 milligrams relaxes most people. And then our 10 milligram IPA, that'll give a buzz to quite a few people, but there's some people that have a high tolerance that it does nothing to them. But most people don't have a high tolerance, and 10 milligrams will give them a buzz. And so our IPA, it's got 10 milligrams of THC plus 10 milligrams of CBD, so that their buzz is more mellow. It's not, not on the borderline of being a psychotic buzz or anything like that. And so that CBD tones it down, makes it mellow, so they can get a good buzz, similar to the way they would feel after having a big glass of IPA. So that was the goal, was to bring cannabis in the form of beer to people.
Okay. And I love it because, I feel you're right. The casual beer drinker wants to be able to have one or two, without being floored, as well as, kind of feel the side effects of that. Whereas the casual consumer of cannabis, you can go and have one or two beers, or if you have a 6-pack in the fridge, you can have one or two after work, the can of beers, and kind of be exactly where you wanted to be as well, because the average edible consumer is not pounding 50 or 100 milligrams. It's 5, 10, 20 is exactly that butter zone, which is the same as 1, 2 glasses of wine, 2, 4 beers. So I love that. But I think, I feel we would be doing a disservice if I didn't ask you. Tell me a little bit about the trial and error, how long it took to perfect this recipe, a little bit about the building out process between you and your wife, and how you got started. Like, what kind of weed are we working with? Where do we get our trim? I mean, I have so many questions. Just start from the beginning and spill it all.
Okay. The first thing we ran into some hurdles right away, because anybody who gets into the cannabis game knows that you're going to run into hurdles. So,
but you don't have it, like, there was no roadmap for you either. You're coming clearly out of the dark. So I can imagine your trial and error is a lot.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The first thing we found out was you can't just put cannabis in beer and combine it with alcohol, because number one, you could get some serious crossfading going on. The worst part is it's illegal. So you could get busted for selling products that contain both alcohol and cannabis in them. So the first big hurdle was creating a great tasting non-alcoholic beer. So I had to do that, something that looked like beer, smelled like beer, and tasted like beer. Because in the world of craft beer, when we started, there really weren't very many non-alcoholic craft beers. So I had to start from scratch and create recipes for craft beers that had no alcohol but tasted good. So that was the first hurdle. So I did that.
So what was I guess, did you have like a reference point that you brought home from Belgium or from your experience at Coors? Like, were you going for a specific flavor? Like, were we trying to be a Blue Moon vibe, or were you trying to come with a totally different vibe?
Well, what I wanted to do was I looked at the sales records for craft beer, and the number one selling variety is IPA. So IPA,
okay.
That's number one. So I said, okay, we got to have an IPA. And the second biggest selling variety or category is Belgian white, mainly because of Blue Moon. And so I said, okay, we'll have an IPA and a Belgian white to start out with. So I created those two styles, and I wanted them to taste and look like beer. So I did that. It took about 6 months or so to develop those recipes.
Okay, I wasn't sure if like that R&D stage, I didn't mean to interrupt, but was like 2 years. Like, I didn't know how from a blank slate how long it would take to get to where you were.
Yeah, mainly because in Belgium, I learned how to do a lot of that stuff years ago. And uh, they were pretty cutting edge when it comes to NA, and not that maybe.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, maybe they did it to smoke weed and put weed in beer. I don't know, but they were pretty good at it. So I learned a lot of that stuff back then. Of course, I had to combine it with modern brewing techniques to make really good tasting, good looking beers with foam that has rich, it's rich and stays.
It's got that head and it's got that smell.
Yeah, exactly.
Biting into the glass.
Yeah, so I worked hard to get the recipes just right. And then the next big hurdle was, how do you put cannabis into beer, into a liquid? Because you can extract it, but it's an oil. So you put it in, it's just going to float on top. So you got to make it water soluble. So we looked at it, and then we decided, you know what? We could come up with some good strategies for this. It's going to take too long. Let's just work with some companies that already have the emulsions in place.
Smart. So you outsourced like the dissolvables that you add into the non-alcoholic beer?
Right. So we can just buy it. Yeah, buy it. Take some, you can buy THC or CBD, then just put that in, put those two together, mix them, and then put that in the beer. So
yeah, that's a lot smarter. I mean, it's you didn't have to go and learn. You didn't have to become a botanist and then learn how to grow doja and then know how to play with it in the fermentation process.
Right. It's almost like a chef that you like with the, I guess a good comparison with cannabis is like it's an oily compound.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a chef taking olive oil and mixing it with vinegar to create a salad dressing. So a chef, he or she will put, herbs and spices and salt and vinegar and oil together and shake it. And then you could look at it in the container, and pretty soon it starts separating. But some of them, they'll put certain ingredients in, like egg yolk or a little bit of sugar, something to act as what they call an emulsifier. And that makes the two stay together so that when they shake it up, it's not going to separate very quickly. It'll take a long time before it separates because of that emulsifier. And so in the cannabis world, you do the same thing. You find something to be the emulsifier and get that cannabis oil to mix into water so that when you shake it up, it's all ready to go and pour into beer or water or wine or whatever you want. So and it works really well. And it's funny because I just finished writing a book. It's called Brewing with Cannabis, and it's a book. It's the first book since I think the early 1990s that actually talks about brewing with cannabis. And in there, I talk about how to grow the plant, how to harvest. I talk about the laws as the history, like why it became illegal, and it turns out one of the big reasons is because it posed a threat to the profits of a few companies back then. Powerful companies. And so what they did is they lobbied Congress to make it illegal by calling it a narcotic, highly addictive. They had all these terrible things to say about it, and that resulted in it being illegal to this day. So it's hopefully the world is getting smarter and will make it legal because it's not addictive. It's not a narcotic. It's not dangerous. It's like alcohol. In fact, some people say it's healthier than alcohol because it doesn't lead to liver damage and all these other things. So in my book, I talk about how to make it water soluble. And so people can actually pick up that book and learn how to grow their plants, harvest, decarboxylate, make it water soluble. And I even give some homebrew recipes so people can make their own beers and put the cannabis in. I've got a recipe for a peanut butter porter and a chocolate stout and a lager. So it's all kinds of cool stuff.
And all of those. So how many flavors do you have currently going out of Ceria Brewing? Are those peanut butter stouts, and those are just normal alcoholic brews? Or are you talking about cannabis?
So that's in my book.
Yeah. That's what I meant. Like, I just wasn't sure if you were giving away other cannabis recipes or if those were just alcohol recipes.
Well, they're alcohol recipes, but in there I show people how to use your stove to get rid of all that alcohol if you want to make it non-alcoholic. So,
okay, I got you.
Yeah. So but here at Ceria, we just have two flavors right now. We have the Belgian white and the IPA. The reason for that is because we're still going and